Well, happy 4th of July. Wearing my red, white, and blue shirt. It's actually orange, white, and blue, but it's the closest thing I have. But I had an interesting conversation with my good friend Truett about my last post. Truett's a remarkable young man, and he must be because he likes me. But I have never met anyone who asks the most penetrating questions about God, about life, and about the nature of things. He challenges me. And he and Corey, his dad-in-law, have started a podcast, and they talk about all things Bible and spirituality. And I asked Truett if he would see if Corey would listen to my last post. I don't get much feedback, so I don't know how what I discuss registers, and I was especially interested in Corey's perspective because he's a very practical person and doesn't come at spirituality from an established church perspective. And I can be obtuse, I know, at times, so I try very hard not to be. So Corey made an observation that I hadn't thought of. By the way, if you hadn't heard the last post, it was about God speaking personally and directly to you and to people. While he is God most high, he is more God most nigh. And he doesn't take you out into the crowd to communicate with you, but he speaks directly and intimately. So Corey agreed that we need his help and his voice from time to time, but too much of that would take away the essence of our humanness, which is our ability to choose. Basically, too much of God speaking, and we would become robots. Corey touched on free will versus the sovereignty of God, which is in the sovereignty of man, which is amazing. I thought this was very perceptive. Corey is trying to get to the heart of the matter, which is who is God and what the nature and the purpose of creation and his relationship to it, and by extension, your nature and purpose and your relationship to God. If God is silent, the picture I see is that of a pinball of being thwacked around without knowing who's thwacking or why. Once in a while you land in a good place, but ultimately, after all the thwacking, you lose. But the one who made everything, including you, does speak. It would be cruel if he would let you come to be and kept you in the dark. John says that he enlightens everyone who is born. And you can't know what is in the mind of another unless that person speaks. You speak to get out into the public what's hidden inside. Speaking is self-revelation. Your inner desires, your perception of reality, your personality, all comes out in your words and your feelings. So, in the beginning was the Word. I hope we would all agree that there is no problem with God speaking, whether creation or circumstances or through the Spirit or Bible or through others, God speaks. So the greater issue then is us being attuned to him. In the social age, each one of us have experienced communication that has gone awry. We heard one thing while the person was really trying to say something else. A professor told me that communication is not what you are saying or what I am speaking, but it's what the other person hears. You can have the most perfect talk, but these words go through someone else's filter. So it's possible for Christians, for people to hear Jesus' words, but not really hear what he's saying. You and I have been colored by our culture and the church. How we hear and what we can hear has been affected by these. And the first relates to our Western mindset, which is based largely on objective knowledge. Facts, logic, and debate win the day. Now, this works great in math, but try that with your wife. Oh, I have. It doesn't work. But he wants you to know him, but not objectively. You cannot satisfactorily study God under a microscope, even in excessive Bible studies. You can know a frog by dissecting it, but all you would have left is a lifeless religion that many have experienced and left. But if you could penetrate that frog and live your life as a frog, what sort of knowledge would you have? This is the knowing God is offering you, I in you and you in me. And this begins and continues by hearing his voice. So if your concept of God speaking is colored by your culture, then you're going to see him up there, you down here, and the reason he speaks as corrective and directive. He speaks to get you from point A to point B, but God never works in a straight line. And we all start out with this mentality, and if you haven't yet, you're going to find it doesn't work. It didn't work in the era of the law, and it certainly will not work in the era of grace. So the question is, how are you trying to know God? Objectively or subjectively? Can you just present yourself before God and be? So this subjective mentality filters his voice. But if you're a Christian, there are other filters that can keep you from hearing God, even though you're listening to his words. And this is going to take another post because it involves both the underlying theology of the church you are attending and your developmental stage. John describes 3 stages of a Christian: little children, young men, and fathers. If you are hearing a young man message as a little child, it'll be confusing and a recipe for frustration. Also, most church theology focuses on the little children and young men stage, which is getting you right with God and then getting you to serve. But I need to unpack all this so you can, and I think you find it helpful as you try to figure out your life. But more than that, as you see what God is really trying to say to you in the stage you're at, you'll come to understand that God does not speak to get you to do something, but to grow into the person that he imagined. Until next time.